Well, I get the high chair today, and I think the dunce hat is right over here. Just put that right on top of it. At least hard didn't in the corner with my nose to the wall. So I'm grateful for that. Well, again, I think I always love to speak to sympathetic crowds, and I feel like I got a sympathetic crowd here in the fact that most everybody is Alpha enthusiast, or at least has an interest in the Alpha course, and that's always a joy. Just to give a little background, I think Hardin's primary objective in asking me to talk is to speak a little bit about Scotland and then our use of the Alpha course in church planting. So years ago, my church did a really dumb thing. The church I was pastoring in Richardson, they said, "Ken, we want to send you anywhere in the world vacation. You've been a good pastor. We'll send you anywhere." So I said, "Well, send me to Scotland." And that was 1997. And when I went to Scotland, here's the home of the Presbyterian Church and tremendous history. And when I got there, I realized, here's a church that's kind of like going in reverse. They're closing churches left, right, and center. And you go to those beautiful cities, Edinburgh and Glasgow and Aberdeen, and when you look out over the horizon, all you see are these big, huge church spires that just reach up into the sky. It's beautiful. And sadly, when you get down into the city, you discover that a lot of these churches are closed, and they're assortment of variety of secular businesses, apartments, whatnot. So it kind of saddened me, actually, because I'm a great student of the Presbyterian Church, even though I'm not Presbyterian. To me, I love their theology. So it saddened me. Anyway, long story short, on the runway of London, on my way home, to show you how these things begin, I always love to find the source of where they're sitting on the runway. I had a passing thought. It wasn't an angelic visitation. It wasn't a voice, I didn't hear the voice of the Lord. It was a passing thought that went something like this: wouldn't it be great if someone could come back here and help plant churches? And like I said, a passing thought that kind of was like a little tiny seed that went into my heart, that began to grow and grow and grow and grow. People ask me, "Ken, how did you know God was calling you to the mission field?" And I simply say, God planted a little seed in my heart that would not die. It grew and grew and became a life of its own. So that was 1997. I came back to the States, wrestled a year over the call, ended up resigning my church in 1998, and began the process of making my way with a particular missions organization to go to Scotland. And the purpose was to plant churches. We landed in Scotland November of 2001, after I'd raised my money, and was assigned a city called Hamilton, which is just outside of Glasgow, a city of about 60,000 people. And again, like Hardin made reference to, I love to meet people. I love to talk with, engage with people. I think it's the spice of life is to hear their stories. And so I made up a little community survey, and every day my job was, this is long before the church ever started, by the way. I made up these community surveys, and as I went to coffee shops and would meet people, I would say, "Hey, would you mind, I'm new here to the area and I don't know much about your city. Would you mind taking 5 minutes and tell me a little bit?" And of course, the Scots love to talk about themselves, and they love to talk about their culture. And so I had a wide open door, and it was through that I was able to get a whole lot of information and kind of prepared the setting, I guess, for what I felt like the Lord wanted us to do. So anyway, long story short, I'm going to just abbreviate a lot of this stuff. I had a missionary friend in the Netherlands who called me before I started the church. He says, "Ken, before you get going, let me tell you something about the European culture," and that is the Alpha course. Up to that time, I had never heard of the Alpha course. And he said, "Ken, before you start the church, you ought to go down to London to attend the conference and get a good education, because it really is something that has the blessing of the Lord upon it. And so before I started the church, I made a trip down to London, spent a couple of days at Holy Trinity in Brompton, and attended the course, was fascinated, loved the demographic of the conference. There were ministers and people from all streams of the denominational, smorgasbord. Fantastic representation, great display. The team at HTB were friendly, they were humble, they were helpful. It just had an atmosphere that says, you know what, I really like what's going on here. And so anyway, that was probably in 2002. We started our church through community surveys. We started doing acts of kindness, and at the acts of kindness we then transitioned to an evening service. And after we were probably 3 months into our church plant, we launched our first Alpha course. And I rented a little college room on the college campus, and we catered in some lasagna and sandwiches and things of that nature, and probably had around 25 people that attended our first course. And out of that 25, we had about 9 conversions, people who gave their lives to Christ. And that was the beginning of my church, was those 25 people. And that's where we started, and we continued to progress. We planted a church and turned it over there probably in 2009. And after that, we planted 2 other churches in Scotland, one in a place called Bridgeton, and then the third one in a place called Easterhouse. Each one of these churches now are active Alpha churches who use the Alpha course at least once a year. In terms of strategy, as Hardin made reference to, Scotland is a culture that the church is that old great brick building that sits over there on the corner, and the only people that go there are a few old people that kind of just hobble in on Sundays. And that's the concept and mentality of the church. So I knew that we had to take the church outside of the walls and get it out on the streets. So I'm a huge fan of acts of kindness, random acts of kindness, where I'm engaging the culture. I'm giving away free bottles of water. Every Saturday, monthly on Saturdays, we would bring out roses. We'd give the roses to ladies as they were shopping. They had a little simple card that said, hey, this rose was handmade by God, just like you. It was just a simple statement of God's love. On the heels of our acts of kindness, we would always have the ability to find out more about the Alpha course. So it was kind of like a strategic 1-2 punch, where we always tried to include the Alpha course. So anyway, my point today is to try to talk a little bit about why I feel like Alpha is good in terms of church planting. And first of all, my point would be Alpha is good in church planting because it helps define what the target is. The target for church planting, as Hardin made reference to, is lost people. Lost people. Sadly, a lot of church planting here in America is just code word for transfer growth. Let me go fleece your church and your church and your church to pad my church. And I just have some very strong opinions about that and convictions about that, that's not church planting. Actually, that's a lazy way, and it's sadly becoming more of an American model that I feel like is unfortunate. So if we really are going to be true to our thoughts about church planting, then our target should be lost people. Well, Alpha, of course, is something that targets lost people. It's all about introducing the gospel to Christians. So if you have a core team that you're working with, if you wanted to plant a church, then doing the Alpha course defines the target. This is the way. Imagine, let me put it this way. Imagine if I brought us out on a basketball court and I threw a bunch of basketballs out, but there was no goal. We're all just out there bouncing the ball. And it says, man, isn't this great? Well, what are we supposed to do here, Ken? Hey, just bounce the ball. Well, after a while, you would say, okay, this is great. Suppose I took you out on a golf course and I said, man, isn't this fun? And there was no actual green and a hole. What are we supposed to do out here? Well, we just hit the ball around. Okay, well, that's great. Well, Alpha defines the target. What is the target? The target is lost people. So I think that's important. Second thing about why I use Alpha in church planting is that it helps define the DNA of your church. Are you going to be a church that just is the holy huddle that says, hey man, let's just come in here and love on each other and slap backs and give hugs and high fives and all of this thing? Or are we going to be a church that focuses outwardly and has an outward focus? And I believe that the church is to be one that focuses on outreach. So therefore, it establishes the DNA. Thirdly, it mobilizes the team. And we've just been a part of a church plant. And one of the first things that we did was we did an Alpha course. And a part of the team, everyone's a part of it. Everyone's mobilized. And that's a big part. Total involvement. Everyone, there's big buy-in, and so everyone's a part of the involvement. And last of all, in regards to church planting, I believe that it's accessible and it's adaptable, regardless of the setting that you're involved in. You guys enjoy your omelets while I'm up here doing the talking. By the way, just like it's quite distracting. I'm here looking at Bob Flake. I'm saying alpha, eggs, sausage. Alpha. So it's a little bit distracting, but enjoy it. I'll get mine in a second. So accessible and adaptable. Okay. You can conduct Alpha course at a local pub. You can do Alpha course at a local restaurant. You can do Alpha course in so many settings. It's just absolutely incredible. So that's why I love the Alpha course. I hear someone saying we're doing a thank you. Now you're really distracted. It's like, there's my breakfast tacos. Oh, Alpha. That's right, Alpha. Where was I? Alpha tacos. Did I say Alpha is adaptable and accessible?
And you always eat it, Alpha.
You can do it at breakfast, you can do it at dinner, you can do it at lunch. You can do it in apartment buildings. I hear today that people are moving into apartments. And you can just rent a room. It can start as a small group. It can start as a church group. There's so many variety of settings that Alpha is applicable and successful. One of the things that I wanted to address today in my little bit, I've been doing a lot of reading here recently about the state of the church, and not only church planting. I will always use Alpha in church planting because I think it's so powerful. But I think that average churches or churches that are up and going ought to give Alpha a second look simply for church survival. Not just church planting, church survival. I think every statistic that I read about the state of the American church confirms that we're not winning. We're not winning. There is just the continual slide and decline, even though there are a few mega churches that are prospering and that are growing. When you look at the church world as a whole, we're still closing more churches than we're opening, and our net growth is not in the positive. It's actually in the negative. And again, my particular denomination is involved in church planting, but the statistics of our denomination confirm that all we're doing is just maintaining a plateau. We're opening almost as many churches as we're closing. So there's really not the net growth. Okay, what do we do? Is this like a crisis, or should we take note of this? I think we should. I think a lot of the church climate creates consumers as opposed to those that are really true Christ followers, and I think that has a lot to do with the church leadership. The consumer would be one who says, there's the church, it's got the great show, it's got the church in a box, let's go watch the show. Hey, look, it's all about me. I want good ministry for my kids, I want good ministry I want good singing, I want good preaching, I want good, a good show. As opposed to really, look, the true spirit of Christianity is, come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And, Matthew 4:19, Jesus said, come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. It's not a consumer. It is really a practitioner or someone that's on mission for God. So anyway, I feel like there needs to be a real shift in churches, and I feel like for established churches, one of the best ways that you can facilitate this is the introduction of the Alpha course, because it exposes church people back to the true mission of Christ, and that is reaching and seeking those that are lost and engaging them with the gospel. Anyway, so it changes the shift from being an attractional model to a missional model. I've been reading a book here recently by Tim Stevens. The name of the book is Lost and Found, and he brings up this statistic of the shrinking 40% and the growing 60%. So if you can, kind of plug in, because I really want you to capture the spirit of what Tim is saying about this. The shrinking 40 and the growing 60. The name of the book is Lost and Found by Tim Stevens. He begins with a quote. Alan Hirsch, who is a spokesman for this missional movement, believes that the model of the attractional church is still working for only 40% of our population. The attractional model. The attractional model would be, here's our church in a box, come watch us, come to our show. We've got a great show over here at this church, come watch it. That's the attractional model. So that is still appealing to only 40% of the U.S. population. And then he goes on to say, do 40% of our population attend the attractional model? And the answer is obviously no. There are probably around 40% of the population for whom the come to us model still works. Okay? Then he goes on and talks about this 60%, and let's go to that. We can analyze why the 40% don't work, or why the 60%, but let's don't go there. He goes on and says, the growing 60% are people who still believe in God, somewhat. They have respect for Jesus and would consider themselves on a spiritual journey. But they don't want to go to your church, and are probably not going to go to your church. So if you could envision, here's an hourglass, okay? Up here is the shrinking 40, and down here is the growing 60. Let's look at this for a little bit. The shrinking 40, the growing 60. Everybody got the picture? So if our concept is stuck on the attractional model, come to our church, come to our show. We've got lights and video. We got an awesome band. We got a dynamic preacher. Your model is only going to appeal to a shrinking 40. But if you say, look, there's 60%, a growing 60% in Dallas today that still believe in God, are interested in Jesus Christ, and would consider themselves on a spiritual journey, but they're probably not going to go to your church. This growing 60, he goes on to say, they don't consider the church as a resource to help them take their next step. Now think about that. That means your church, my church. They don't look at our church as being significant in helping them in their spiritual journey. So, yeah, that's why it's a shrinking 40%. So this is how they pursue their spiritual journey. He goes on to say, they pursue their spirituality through culture, friendships, music, TV personalities, and their own study of the Bible and self-help books. Let me go through that list again, and maybe something will register. They're pursuing spirituality through culture, friendships, music, TV personalities, their own study of the Bible, and self-help books. I wish I invited my son to be here. Eric is 27 years of age. And here's another statistic that Tim Stephen gave. He said more than 25% or less, more than 25% of Americans born after 1981 have no religious preference or affiliation at all. In other words, there's this growing section called the nuns. Not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-S. What religious affiliation do you have? None. And fewer than 20% of the 20-somethings will frequent a worship service this weekend. So, 1 out of 5 will attend a church service this weekend, of 20-somethings. And yet they're still on a spiritual journey. Yet they're most likely to pray as often as their elders and be in pursuit of God, only they do it outside of the traditional church. So anyway, my point is simply this. For the established church, again, we look at this little hourglass and we say, as church leaders, well, you know what I need? I need a better worship leader. You know what I need? I need a new video camera. If I just had a better video projector and a media graphics guy at my church, then I feel like we could really hit the ball out of the park. And you know what? There's still a shrinking 40% for which you'll probably have a market for. But it's shrinking. and the sand is falling through the glass. If you were going to be a little bit more progressive and out of the box and ahead of the curve as a church leader, maybe you should shift your focus and says, how can I target this growing 60% who is probably not going to show up at my church? They care very little about how good my worship leader is and the band I've got. If they wanted to go to hear a band, they could go to Deep Ellum and probably hear some really good bands. And hear some music that they really relate to. So if that's the case, then how am I going to reach this growing 60%? And my prayer is that the church would wake up to this movement and says, okay, let's prepare ourselves for this new wave of church life. What's exciting to see, and I'll close with this, so I can eat my tacos before they're too cold. What's exciting is I've been to Scotland, and I've seen what closed churches look like. Now, I've moved back to the States, but what I'm hearing is that through the use of Alpha Course, there is a revitalization among the Anglican Church, where now there's actually new churches going into these communities, and now there's new life and new growth occurring. And it's through the use of Alpha Course, and it's through the use of these new innovative ways that now there is a resurgence. And my prayer is this, and this is why, Hardin, that I feel like I would love to be a part of this group, actually, is because I want to be a catalyst that waves a flag that says, listen, consider the other 60%, consider having an Alpha Course at an apartment building, at a restaurant, mobilize, equip your church to do something a little bit out of the box, because there is a growing 60% that are probably not going to show up in your church but on Sunday, but they'll show up to the pub on Tuesday night. Okay?
And they're on a spiritual journey.
They're on a spiritual journey.
Yeah, in their own way.
That's right.
That any help in the church.
And that's why I just feel like, George, what you did was just superb. Superb. These two people that had the most significant encounter with God that they've ever had in their life, probably have at least 4 or 5 friends that are in their network of friends that they had great influence with. And it's just so natural to say, listen, we're going to be launching another course in 3 weeks. Would you feel comfortable in inviting your friends to come along and share with them? Because these friends are probably going to know the difference that this encounter with God has made in their life. It just seems so natural, as opposed to the awkwardness of, did you know that God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life? And here's the 4 spiritual laws. Yeah. It's just so awkward. It's like, me meeting a perfect stranger on the street and says, do you wear boxers or briefs? It's like, who are you and what did you just ask me?
You going to heaven or hell when you die?
It's like, that's none of your business. It's just so awkward. And so most churches feel like this is evangelism. Do you wear boxers or briefs? Yeah. No wonder they just say, look, I'm checking out. That's not me. But it is so natural for me to say, here's my buddy Steve Wilson. I've known Steve almost all my life. He trusts me, I trust him, we're friends. Hey Steve, come along to my Alpha meeting. I think you'll enjoy it. It's just so natural. For some reason or another, God favor is resting on the Alpha course. All over the world. I don't know why, it's just a tool God seems to be blessing. There's an anointing that's resting on the Alpha course. And why wouldn't you want to buy in to what God is blessing and, ride the wave? So, anyway, that's my
Wow,
thought.
that's good.